The woman standing in front of him looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. Tears gathered in her eyes, but they never fell. Instead, she stared at the man she had laughed with, argued with, and slowly fallen in love with over countless quiet weekends. The simple office worker who always claimed he hated crowded cities, the shy customer who never let her carry heavy boxes alone, the man who said money could never buy peace. Only now, dozens of luxury black vehicles surrounded the tiny countryside cafe. Men in tailored black suits bowed their heads the moment he stepped outside. Chairman. No. Mafia boss. Her trembling lips parted as the truth finally crashed into her heart. You lied to me. He didn't deny it. Because for the first time in his life, the most feared man in Korea wasn't afraid of losing his empire. He was terrified of losing the only woman who had ever loved him before she knew his name. But what neither of them realized was that this heartbreaking moment had begun months earlier, with one exhausted man who simply wanted to disappear. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Physial_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. People often imagine that power made life easier. They pictured luxurious penthouses overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, expensive watches, endless wealth, respect from everyone around them. What they never imagined was loneliness. At only 33 years old, Kang Ji-hwan had become one of the youngest and most feared businessmen in South Korea. Officially, he was the chairman of one of the country's largest investment groups. Unofficially, he was the invisible hand controlling an underground organization powerful enough to influence corporations, politicians, and international investors. Every morning began the same way. His assistants prepared 3 tailored suits before sunrise. His security team inspected every route. His secretary organized meetings that stretched from dawn until late evening. Every conversation revolved around contracts. Every smile carried an agenda. Every compliment came with a hidden request. Some wanted his money. Others wanted his influence. Many simply wanted to stand close enough to his name to become important themselves. After years of living behind expensive walls, Ji-hwan had stopped believing genuine people still existed. Even family gatherings felt like business negotiations. Birthdays became networking events. Blind dates turned into discussions about inheritance. Women admired his mansion before they admired him. Some memorized the price of his cars before asking about his dreams. One evening, after another exhausting charity gala filled with fake laughter, Ji-hwan stood alone on the balcony of his mansion overlooking Seoul. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom below. Crystal chandeliers sparkled. Champagne glasses clinked together. Elegant music floated through the air. Yet he had never felt more alone. His elderly butler quietly approached. You should return inside, sir. Ji-hwan didn't move. Instead, he asked something unexpected. Have you ever wished nobody knew your name? The old man smiled sadly. Every wealthy man asks that question eventually. That answer stayed with Ji-hwan longer than he expected. The following weekend, without informing anyone except his closest bodyguard, he disappeared. No luxury car. No expensive suit. No security convoy. No chairman. No mafia boss. He packed a small travel bag, wore faded jeans, a plain sweater, sneakers, and a baseball cap. His destination wasn't another luxury resort. It was a quiet countryside village nearly 3 hours away from Seoul. The village rested between green mountains and peaceful farmland, where mornings smelled like fresh coffee instead of expensive perfume. Children rode bicycles without fear. Neighbors greeted one another by name. Flowers decorated wooden fences. Time itself seemed slower. Ji-hwan rented a tiny cabin under a false identity. To everyone there, he introduced himself simply as Han Min, an ordinary office worker who wanted peaceful weekends away from the city. No one questioned him. And for the first time in years, nobody bowed. Nobody stared. Nobody asked for favors. It felt strangely wonderful. The first morning, he wandered through the village with no destination. That's when he noticed a small cafe sitting beside a quiet river. It wasn't fashionable. Its signboard had been painted by hand. Flower pots surrounded the entrance. Wind chimes danced softly whenever the breeze arrived. Warm laughter drifted outside. Something about the place felt alive. Without thinking, he walked in. Behind the counter stood a young African woman arranging freshly baked bread. She couldn't have been older than 28. Her deep brown skin glowed beneath the morning sunlight pouring through the windows. Her naturally curly hair was tied into a neat puff, though a few playful curls escaped around her face. She wore a simple cream-colored apron dusted with flour. There wasn't a trace of expensive jewelry on her. Yet there was something remarkably elegant about the way she smiled. When she noticed him standing awkwardly by the entrance, her face brightened immediately. "Good morning." Her cheerful voice startled him. "You must be new around here." Ji-hwan nodded. "I arrived yesterday." She walked toward him with effortless confidence. "Then welcome. I'm Naya. I own this little cafe." Her smile wasn't practiced. It wasn't polite because of his status. It simply existed. Ji-hwan almost forgot to answer. "I'm Han Min." She laughed softly. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in a week." He blinked. No one had spoken to him that honestly in years. "I suppose work has been busy." "Office worker?" He nodded. She pretended to sigh dramatically. "I knew it. You office people always carry stress on your shoulders." Before he could respond, she placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. "I didn't order. The first cup is free." "Why?" "Because people deserve kindness before they deserve payment." Those words settled somewhere deep inside him. Kindness before payment. He stared into the cup for several silent seconds. She misunderstood. "Oh no. Is it too strong?" He finally smiled. "No. It's perfect." That single smile surprised even him. It had been months since his face relaxed naturally. Naya noticed. "There. That looks much better. You should smile more often." He almost laughed. If only she knew. The man she was telling to smile more often had once made billion-dollar negotiations collapse with nothing more than a cold stare. Over the following weekends, visiting the cafe became part of his routine. He always ordered the same coffee. She always remembered exactly how he liked it. Sometimes she was busy serving customers. Other times they chatted while she prepared pastries. Their conversations remained wonderfully ordinary. She complained about rising coffee bean prices. He listened. He spoke about imaginary office deadlines. She sympathized. She teased him for being too serious. He found himself looking forward to her teasing. One rainy Saturday afternoon, business slowed to almost nothing. Only Ji-hwan remained inside. Naya glanced through the rain-covered windows. "I guess today belongs to the weather." She grabbed 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "You've already had coffee." "I know. But rainy days deserve hot chocolate." She sat across from him without hesitation. No fear. No admiration. No expectations. Just quiet company. After several peaceful minutes, she suddenly asked, "Han Min, when you're not working, what makes you happy?" The question caught him completely off guard. Nobody had asked him that in years. He searched for an answer but realized something unsettling. He didn't know. Meanwhile, what Ji-hwan didn't realize was that this simple question would begin changing everything he believed about happiness, love, and the life he had spent years building. And while he struggled to answer, the quiet weekends that had become his escape were slowly turning into something far more dangerous for his guarded heart. Because for the first time, he wasn't counting the days until Monday. He was counting the days until he could see Naya again. But neither of them knew that every beautiful lie has a moment when the truth quietly begins to catch up. Ji-hwan looked down at the mug of hot chocolate warming his hands. Naya's question lingered in the air. "When you're not working, what makes you happy?" It sounded so simple, yet he couldn't answer it. His silence stretched for several seconds until he finally let out a quiet laugh. "I don't think anyone has ever asked me that before." Naya tilted her head in surprise. "Really?" He nodded. "Most people ask what I do, not how I live." She smiled gently. "Then maybe you've been talking to the wrong people." Her words settled deep inside him. For years, every conversation had revolved around profits, power, meetings, investments, or expectations. No one had cared whether he had slept well, eaten properly, or simply enjoyed watching the sunset. But this woman, she seemed interested in the person behind the conversation. Not the title, not the money, just him. "I like quiet places," he admitted. "I guess that's why I keep coming here." Naya looked around her little cafe before smiling proudly. "Then I'm honored my tiny cafe qualifies." He chuckled. "It's my favorite place these days." She looked away quickly, pretending to wipe the counter to hide the smile spreading across her face. Neither of them realized how naturally they had begun making space for each other. The weekend slowly turned into something Ji-hwan treasured more than any business victory. Every Friday evening, the moment his final meeting ended, he would drive to the countryside. His bodyguards insisted on following from a distance. Only his closest security chief, Min Suk, knew the truth. They stayed hidden several kilometers away, watching silently without interfering. Their orders were simple. Never let anyone discover who he really was. Never enter the village unless his life depended on it. Ji Huan wanted those weekends to remain untouched by the world he desperately escaped. Back in Seoul, people noticed the difference. His secretary blinked in confusion one Monday morning. "You seem happier lately." Ji Huan raised an eyebrow. "Do I? You've smiled 3 times today." He almost laughed. Apparently, smiling 3 times was enough to alarm the entire executive office. Meanwhile, life at the cafe continued as peacefully as ever. Naya treated every customer exactly the same. Whether someone ordered 1 cookie or 10 cups of coffee, everyone received the same warm smile. Watching her became one of Ji Huan's favorite parts of the weekend. She remembered elderly customers' favorite pastries. She slipped extra bread into the bags of struggling families without charging them. She kept a small basket of homemade cookies near the entrance with a handwritten sign. For children waiting for their parents. Free. She never made a show of her kindness. She simply believed small acts of love made difficult days easier. One afternoon, Ji Huan noticed a delivery truck arrive with several heavy sacks of coffee beans. Before Naya could lift one herself, he walked outside. "I'll help." She laughed. "You don't have to." "I know. But I want to." The bags were heavier than they looked. By the 3rd trip, she crossed her arms. "You've definitely never worked in a cafe." He smiled. "Is it that obvious? You carried the lightest bag first." He sighed dramatically. "I thought I was being helpful." "You were." She grinned. "Just adorably inexperienced." That single word echoed in his mind the entire evening. Adorable. Nobody had ever described the feared Mafia boss that way. Not once. As the weeks passed, their conversations grew longer. She told him about moving to Korea years earlier after falling in love with the country's peaceful countryside during a volunteer program. Instead of chasing life in Seoul, she had invested every saving she owned into opening a tiny cafe where strangers could feel at home. "My dream wasn't to become rich," she said one evening. "I just wanted one place where people could walk in carrying heavy hearts and leave a little lighter." Ji Huan listened quietly. "Has it worked?" She looked around at the nearly empty cafe. "I think so." Then she smiled. "You keep coming back." He couldn't argue with that. Little by little, she became the safest place in his complicated life. One Saturday morning, she closed the cafe earlier than usual. "I need to buy flowers." "For the cafe?" She shook her head. "For Mrs. Park." "The elderly woman near the river?" Ji Huan nodded. "I've seen her. Her husband passed away 5 years ago. I visit every month. No one should grieve alone forever." Without hesitation, he offered to come along. The old woman welcomed them warmly. She spent nearly 2 hours telling stories about her late husband, laughing through tears as though remembering him kept him alive. As they walked back toward the village, Ji Huan finally asked, "You do this every month?" Naya looked surprised. "Of course." "Why?" "Because one day." She smiled toward the setting sun. "I'll grow old too. I hope someone remembers that loneliness doesn't disappear just because your hair turns gray." He looked at her silently. She carried so much kindness without expecting anything in return. That evening, as they stood beside the river watching the water reflect the orange sky, she suddenly asked another unexpected question. "What were you like as a child?" Ji Huan froze. His childhood wasn't something he liked remembering. Growing up surrounded by violence, betrayal, and impossible expectations had stolen his innocence long before adulthood arrived. But he couldn't tell her that. So instead, he smiled faintly. "I grew up too fast." Her eyes softened. "I know that feeling." She didn't ask for details. She simply stood beside him. Sometimes understanding required silence more than words. Meanwhile, back in Seoul, trouble quietly began brewing. During an executive meeting, one ambitious director placed several photographs on the conference table. "They've been taken every weekend." Ji Huan looked down. His heart stopped. The pictures showed him entering Naya's cafe, helping her unload deliveries, laughing, smiling, looking ordinary. "This woman," the director continued carefully. "Should we investigate her?" Another executive frowned. "Perhaps she's trying to get close to the chairman." Ji Huan's expression turned ice cold. "No." The room immediately fell silent. "She knows nothing about me. No one contacts her." No one follows her. No one speaks to her. Is that understood? Every executive nodded immediately, but rumors had already begun spreading. The mysterious woman in the countryside. The only place the chairman disappeared to every weekend. The only person who could make him smile. Unfortunately, rumors never stayed trapped inside boardrooms. One weekend, Ji-hwan arrived later than usual. Naya folded her arms dramatically. You're 43 minutes late. He blinked. You counted. She looked away quickly. I was keeping track of the pastries. He laughed. I'll try harder next week. She smiled despite herself. That afternoon, rain forced every customer indoors. The cafe became unexpectedly crowded. A little boy accidentally tripped while carrying hot chocolate. The drink splashed across Ji-hwan's sweater. The child immediately burst into tears. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Everyone turned to look. Ji-hwan simply crouched down and smiled. It's okay. It was an accident. The boy sniffled. Really? Really? Naya watched the interaction quietly. Later that evening, after closing the cafe, she handed him a neatly folded sweater. It's my brother's. You'll catch a cold. I'll wash yours. He hesitated. I can't let you. She interrupted him. You've helped me dozens of times. Let me help you once. He accepted it. The sweater smelled faintly of fresh laundry and lavender. For reasons he couldn't explain, it felt more valuable than every custom-made suit waiting inside his mansion. That night, instead of driving back immediately, they sat outside the cafe beneath a sky filled with stars. The countryside was so quiet that even the sound of crickets felt comforting. Naya looked up. Do you ever think people spend too much time chasing things they'll eventually leave behind? He looked at her. What do you mean? Money, status, recognition. She smiled gently. When life ends, no one asks how expensive your watch was. They remember how you made them feel. Her words pierced straight through the walls around his heart. Without thinking, he whispered, I wish I'd met you years ago. She looked at him, her smile slowly fading into something softer. So do I. Neither of them spoke again. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was filled with emotions neither of them were ready to name. As Ji-hwan drove back to Seoul the following morning, one thought repeated itself over and over. He wasn't pretending anymore. The fake name was a lie. But the man Naya had fallen for. The man who laughed, carried coffee sacks, watched sunsets, and finally remembered how to smile. That man was completely real. What he didn't know was that fate had already begun pulling at the thread of his carefully hidden identity. A single photograph, taken from a distance by someone he never noticed, was about to travel far beyond Seoul's boardrooms. And before another peaceful weekend could arrive, the quiet little cafe that had become his sanctuary would unknowingly stand on the edge of a truth that neither love nor good intentions could keep hidden forever. The photograph spread faster than anyone inside Ji-hwan's organization expected. It wasn't dramatic. There were no luxury cars, no bodyguards, no expensive watches. Just a simple picture of the feared chairman wearing a plain sweater, laughing as he carried bags of coffee beans beside a smiling cafe owner. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. But to people who knew Kang Ji-hwan, it was unbelievable. Inside the headquarters in Seoul, whispers followed him through every hallway. The chairman smiled. He goes to the countryside every weekend. Who is she? Could she be his girlfriend? What if she's trying to get close to him? Ji-hwan ignored every rumor. The only thing that mattered was keeping Naya away from his complicated world. He called Min Suk into his office. I want every photograph deleted. We've tried, sir. And they keep resurfacing. Ji-hwan closed his eyes. The internet had a way of turning ordinary moments into public entertainment. One picture became 10. 10 became hundreds. Fortunately, none of them mentioned the exact location of the cafe. At least, not yet. Meanwhile, life in the countryside remained beautifully unchanged. Naya had no idea strangers were discussing her online. She spent her mornings baking fresh bread before sunrise. She greeted every customer with the same cheerful smile. And every Friday evening, she found herself glancing toward the road just a little more often than usual. She would never admit it, but she had started recognizing the sound of Ji-hwan's car before she could even see it. When he finally arrived that weekend, she folded her arms. I was beginning to think your office promoted you. He laughed. I wish. She narrowed her eyes playfully. You've become suspiciously busy. I've had meetings. On a Saturday? Unfortunately. She shook her head. You office people need better bosses. If only she knew. He smiled without correcting her. That afternoon, the village held its annual summer market. It wasn't a grand festival. Just neighbors selling homemade food, flowers, pottery, handmade scarves, and fresh fruit beneath colorful decorations. Children ran through the streets laughing. Local musicians played gentle melodies. The entire village seemed brighter. Naya insisted Ji Huan come with her. You've been hiding inside the cafe too much. I'm not hiding. Oh, she grinned. Then prove it. He surrendered with a smile. For hours, they wandered from stall to stall like two ordinary people enjoying an ordinary day. She convinced him to taste homemade honey. He bought handmade wooden coasters because she said they matched the cafe. She laughed when he completely failed a simple ring toss game. I thought office workers were competitive. I wasn't prepared. Excuses already? I demand a rematch. She burst into laughter. That sound. Bright. Carefree. Completely genuine. Ji Huan realized he would gladly lose 100 games if it meant hearing her laugh again. As evening approached, lanterns illuminated the riverside. The village gathered to watch floating candles drift across the water. Each person silently made one wish before placing their candle into the river. Naya handed one to Ji Huan. Go on. You first. She closed her eyes. For several quiet seconds, she whispered something only the river could hear. Then she released her candle. It floated peacefully into the darkness. What did you wish for? He asked. She smiled. If I tell you, it won't come true. What about you? He stared at the tiny candle in his hands. His wish came immediately. I hope this never ends. When he opened his eyes, he gently placed it into the water. Neither of them noticed someone standing several meters away, taking photographs. Not a tourist. Not a villager. A business reporter who had spent weeks investigating rumors surrounding Korea's mysterious chairman. The camera clicked quietly. Once, twice, 3 times, then disappeared into the crowd. By Monday morning, everything changed. Every major business news website carried the same headline. The Phantom Chairman's Secret Weekend Life. Another article followed. The woman who captured Korea's coldest billionaire. Although the reports never mentioned Ji Huan's underground influence, they revealed everything else. His real name, his companies, his wealth, his mansion, his private jet, his billion-dollar empire. Even old photographs of him attending international meetings appeared beside the new images from the countryside. Within hours, the story became national news. Back at the cafe, Naya knew nothing. Until lunchtime, a tourist walked inside. He ordered coffee, then looked at her strangely. You're famous. She laughed. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. He showed her his phone. Her smile disappeared. On the screen, Ji Huan, not wearing jeans, not smiling. Instead, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, surrounded by executives, photographers, and luxury vehicles. The headline beneath the picture made her hands tremble. Kong Ji Huan, chairman of Hanseong Group. Another article called him one of the most powerful men in South Korea. Another described his influence over industries worth billions. Another showed his enormous mansion overlooking Seoul. Naya blinked repeatedly. No, there must be some mistake. The tourist shrugged. They say he's been secretly dating a cafe owner. I guess congratulations are in order. He laughed and walked away. Naya remained frozen. Her heart refused to believe what her eyes had already accepted. Minutes later, Ji Huan's car pulled into the parking area. He stepped out carrying her favorite pastries from Seoul. The moment their eyes met, he knew. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't waving. She simply stood there holding her phone. Naya. She slowly lifted the screen. Who are you? Silence. Customers quietly left the cafe one after another, sensing the tension. I asked. Her voice cracked. Who are you? Ji Huan looked down. My name is Kong Ji Huan. She closed her eyes. Sohan Min. Never existed. It was a name. But the person. She interrupted him. Don't. I don't want another lie. He stepped closer. Everything we shared was real. She laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because her heart didn't know what else to do. Real. You watched me tell you everything about myself. You knew my dreams. My fears. My past. And every weekend. You smiled. You listened. You let me believe I knew you. Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. But I never did. He reached toward her. She stepped back. The movement hurt more than any wound he had ever suffered. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. She looked at him in disbelief. Afraid of what? That you'd leave. She shook her head slowly. You decided that for me. Her voice became almost a whisper. You never trusted me enough to let me choose. Those words shattered him. Because they were true. She wasn't angry that he was wealthy. She wasn't intimidated by his influence. She wasn't even upset that he owned companies worth billions. She was heartbroken because the man she loved had never believed she deserved the truth. After several moments of silence, she finally spoke again. My father used to tell me something. A lie told to protect love still becomes a lie. She looked directly into his eyes. I would have stayed. I would have accepted every part of your life. If only you'd trusted me enough to tell me yourself. His chest tightened. Every word felt heavier than the last. I wanted more time. You already had months. Another painful silence followed. Then she quietly untied the small knitted bracelet she had made for him weeks earlier. It was simple. Blue thread. A tiny wooden bead. She had laughed while giving it to him. So you don't forget your favorite cafe. Now. She placed it gently on the table between them. I think. She whispered. You should go. He didn't move. For the first time in years. Kang Ji-hwan, the man powerful enough to command entire boardrooms with a single glance, found himself completely helpless. Because no amount of money could repair broken trust. No influence could rewrite the past. No empire could convince the woman he loved that his silence had come from fear rather than manipulation. He looked at her one last time. I love you, Naya. She closed her eyes as fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. I know. And that's what makes this hurt even more. Without another word, Ji-hwan walked out of the cafe. For the first time since discovering the little countryside village, he drove away without looking back. Inside, Naya stood motionless until his car disappeared beyond the hills. Only then did she allow herself to cry. She wasn't mourning the loss of a billionaire. She was mourning the loss of the ordinary man she thought she had known. Meanwhile, Ji-hwan drove through the winding countryside roads with one painful realization echoing in his mind. He had spent his entire life believing that hiding the truth would protect the people he loved. Instead, it had destroyed the only relationship that had ever felt real. But fate wasn't finished with their story yet. Sometimes love isn't tested when two hearts come together. It is tested when they are forced apart. And neither of them knew that their next meeting would not be planned by chance, but by two hearts that still refused to let go, despite everything that had been broken. The following weekend, the road leading to the little countryside cafe remained painfully quiet. For the first time in months, no familiar car pulled into the parking space beneath the old maple tree. No tall man walked through the wooden door wearing a simple sweater and an awkward smile. Naya tried to convince herself it didn't matter. She buried herself in work instead. She kneaded dough before sunrise. She served coffee with the same warm kindness. She greeted every customer exactly as she always had. To everyone else, she looked perfectly fine. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the empty road. Then she would quietly scold herself. You told him to leave. So why are you waiting? Meanwhile, nearly 3 hours away in Seoul, Ji-hwan sat alone inside his office. The room was larger than Naya's entire cafe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city. Executives filled the conference room outside, waiting for him to approve billion-dollar investments. For the first time in years, none of it interested him. His secretary entered cautiously. Sir, the board meeting is ready. Ji-hwan looked at the documents on his desk before quietly closing them. Reschedule. The secretary froze. The board has representatives from 5 countries. Reschedule. It was the first time anyone had seen Kang Ji-hwan walk away from business because of his heart. That evening, he returned to the countryside. Not to ask for forgiveness. Not yet. He knew trust could never be rebuilt in a single conversation. Instead, he parked far from the cafe and quietly walked through the village. He noticed something he had overlooked before. The old wooden bridge had several loose planks. The playground beside the river had peeling paint. Mrs. Park struggled to carry groceries by herself. The community library's roof leaked whenever it rained. He realized that during all the months he had spent escaping there, the village had quietly welcomed him without asking for anything in return. Now it was his turn to give back. But this time, he refused to use his name. Within a week, anonymous donations began arriving. The bridge was repaired. The library received a new roof. The playground was restored. A local scholarship fund was established for children who dreamed of attending university. Every donation carried the same short note. For the people who reminded someone that kindness still exists. No signature. No company logo. No publicity. The villagers wondered who the mysterious benefactor might be. Naya had a feeling, but she said nothing. A month passed. Then another. Summer slowly surrendered to autumn. Golden leaves covered the paths around the cafe. The air became cooler. Life continued moving forward. One quiet afternoon, Naya found Mrs. Park sitting outside her house with 2 cups of tea. "I've been waiting for you," the elderly woman smiled. Naya sat beside her. "You seem sad." "I'm not." Mrs. Park laughed softly. "My dear, old people become experts at recognizing lonely hearts." Naya looked down. "I don't miss his money." "I know. I don't even miss the lie." Mrs. Park nodded. "So what do you miss?" Naya smiled through moist eyes. "I miss the man who made coffee taste better just by sitting across from me. I miss the man who carried heavy boxes even though he was terrible at it. I miss hearing someone complain about imaginary office meetings." She laughed quietly. "I miss Han Min." Mrs. Park reached over and gently squeezed her hand. Perhaps Han Min wasn't imaginary. Those words stayed with Naya long after she walked home. That evening, she unlocked a small drawer beneath the cafe counter. Inside lay the blue knitted bracelet she had returned to Ji Huan. She had secretly picked it up after he left. Unable to throw it away. Unable to wear it. Unable to forget. At that very moment, Ji Huan stood outside the cafe. He had come countless times over the past 2 months. Each time, he left before entering. Today felt different. He took one slow breath and finally opened the door. The little bell above the entrance rang softly. Naya looked up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. For several long seconds, the cafe became completely silent. Finally, Ji Huan walked forward. "I came to tell you something." She waited. "I spent months thinking about what I would say if I ever saw you again." He smiled sadly. "I practiced speeches. I rewrote them. I threw them away." He looked directly into her eyes. "I realized none of them mattered." He slowly placed a small envelope on the counter. "I've officially stepped down from several positions." She blinked. "What?" "I've spent my entire life believing I had to carry everything alone. I don't anymore." She opened the envelope. Inside were official documents announcing a complete restructuring of his companies. Most of the day-to-day responsibilities had been transferred to trusted executives. "You gave this up?" He gently shook his head. "No. I finally learned to stop letting work own my life." He smiled faintly. "You once asked me what made me happy. I couldn't answer. I can now." His voice became softer. "You." Tears immediately filled Naya's eyes. "But that's not why I'm here." He continued before she could respond. "I didn't come expecting another chance. I came because you deserved the truth from the beginning." He told her everything. Not just about his wealth, but about his childhood. Growing up surrounded by people who measured love by usefulness. Learning to hide every weakness. Watching trust become something dangerous. "I thought lying would protect the only beautiful thing in my life." He lowered his head. "I was wrong. I should have trusted your heart instead of fearing it." The cafe fell silent again. Naya slowly walked around the counter. She stood only a step away from him. "When I found out who you were," she whispered, "I asked myself one question every single day." He looked up. Did Han Min ever exist? She reached into her apron pocket. Slowly, she pulled out the blue bracelet. "I finally realized something." She smiled through tears. He did. The name was false. But every laugh, every sunset, every cup of coffee, they were real. Ji Huan's eyes became glassy. "I've never stopped loving you," she admitted quietly. "I only stopped knowing whether I could trust you." He nodded. "I understand. And if your answer is still no, I'll accept it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. She gently took his hand, placed the bracelet back around his wrist, and tied it exactly the way she had months earlier. "This bracelet," she whispered, "isn't a promise that everything is fixed." He listened carefully. "It's a promise that will build trust honestly this time." Emotion overwhelmed him. For the first time in years, tears escaped the eyes of the man everyone believed incapable of crying. Without saying another word, he carefully wrapped his arms around her. She hugged him back, not because the pain had disappeared, but because forgiveness had finally become stronger than fear. Outside, The first autumn leaves drifted gently across the quiet village. The same wind chimes hanging outside the cafe sang softly in the breeze. Life had come full circle. Months later, Ji Huan no longer disappeared to the countryside. Instead, he proudly drove there every weekend under his real name. The villagers greeted him exactly as they always had. Not as a billionaire. Not as a powerful chairman. Not as the man newspapers once called untouchable. Simply as Ji Huan. The man who loved repairing broken benches. The man who still carried coffee bean sacks the wrong way. The man who insisted on washing dishes after closing, even though Naya laughed at how slow he was. As for Naya, her little cafe became more than just a business. It became a place where people from every walk of life gathered. Executives sat beside farmers. Tourists shared tables with elderly neighbors. Children still reached for the free cookie basket near the door. Nothing about her kindness had changed. Only now, someone stood beside her, making sure she never carried every burden alone. Years later, a young couple visiting the cafe asked them the secret to a lasting relationship. Naya smiled at Ji Huan before answering. Choose someone who tells you the truth. Ji Huan smiled back. And if you make a mistake, don't just apologize. Become someone worthy of being trusted again. The young couple nodded thoughtfully, unaware they had just received wisdom born from heartbreak. Because in the end, this was never a story about a mafia boss hiding behind a false identity. It was a story about two lonely hearts who discovered that love isn't proven by expensive gifts, powerful names, or impressive titles. Real love is choosing honesty, even when the truth feels frightening. Real love is earning trust after you've broken it. And real love is finding the one person who sees your heart before they ever see your success. Sometimes, the greatest distance between two people isn't measured in miles, it's measured in secrets. Wealth can build mansions, influence can command respect, and power can open countless doors, but none of those things can replace honesty. Trust is the foundation of every lasting relationship, and when it is broken, only humility, patience, and consistent actions can rebuild it. The deepest love is not the one that never faces hardship, but the one that chooses truth, forgiveness, and growth even after heartbreak. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional mafia love stories that will stay with you long after the story ends.